Our guest today is a veteran of the oil industry who started out at OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Then he's worked in the NNPC, and he's currently the General Secretary of the African Petroleum Producers Organization. I'm talking about Dr. Omar Faruk Ibrahim. Dr. Faruk, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Manir.
Can you help us to understand what essentially the organization of which you are the Secretary General is all about? Because people know OPEC is about quotas. What is the African Petroleum Producers Organization about?
The African Petroleum Producers Organization, popularly called APO, was started as African Petroleum Producers Association, APA, in 1987 in Nigeria by 8 oil and gas producing African countries, essentially to share thoughts and also policy making amongst oil and gas producing countries on the African continent. But for over 20 years, in the course of the history of the organization, each member country kind of continued to mind its own business. There wasn't much collaboration or cooperation in policy making. But with the advent of climate change and climate issues and energy transition, which really culminated in the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015, these countries began to ask themselves, our economies are heavily dependent on oil and gas revenue. And we have gone to Paris to sign an agreement that we are going to phase out oil and gas. Exactly.
Energy source.
So we need to do something. We have 125 billion barrels of oil in our ground proven, over 600 trillion cubic feet of gas, and we have been told that we are going to exit this source of this resource. So they said we need to review or revive or reform APA. A committee was set up to reform APA to meet with the challenges of the day. And after about 3 years, in 1999, we completed this assignment, and APA was turned into APO, and the objective was now greater cooperation and collaboration amongst oil and gas producing countries in Africa. One of the first things we did when I was appointed Secretary General of APO is to ask ourselves, what does the global energy transition, how is it going to affect Africa and African countries that are dependent on oil and gas revenue? So we commissioned a major study. The outcome of that study told us that there are 3 key challenges, imminent challenges, that we must address if we are to continue to benefit from the oil and gas resources that we have. The first is finance, because in the nearly 100 years that African countries have been producing oil and gas, we have sat back and relied on international oil companies, international financial institutions, and foreign governments to come and provide the funds for the operation of the oil and gas industry.
Right.
Second, we have relied on foreigners for the technology of the industry.
In fact, some people say without the foreign companies, most African countries can't even bring out the oil.
Exactly. The third is expertise, and finally, the market. So we end up finding that we are actually producing this oil and gas for others. Up to today, 75% of the oil that Africa produces is exported out of Africa. 45% of the gas we produce is exported out of Africa. Yet, Africa has 900 million people who do not have access to modern energy. 600 million Africans do not know what electricity is all about. Yet, we are taking this energy, selling it, getting money to buy consumables and other things, living lifestyles that are fake.
Which is usually what tends to happen when you have this resource, what they call resource curse. You suddenly have lots of money from oil, from some mineral, and then you are spending it in the wrong way.
Manirisi, when you talk about resource curse, look, why is it that it's only in Africa that we have resource curse? Saudi Arabia has oil, Kuwait has oil, Qatar has oil, UAE has oil, yet they have been able to make
it to some positive use.
Okay, so
so is there something African you think about it?
To be honest, sometimes I ask, why is it that when things are done on the African continent, 1,000 excuses are given for why it is not done right? We have some very good people. Definitely we have committed people, but they are very, very, very few. And unfortunately, I think the general orientation that people in Africa, in Nigeria, if you send your son to school, he is trained to believe that that school will give him opportunity to get a big job and get big money. And that is, your success is determined by how much money you are able to accumulate. And I think that is, it's what you call haram, halal. There is no difference
what is legal and
just
what
get,
is not
just get the money.
It's all
anyway,
mixed up.
So let me go back to your question. So when we found out these three challenges, we also realized that there isn't any African country today that has the resources to say that it can fund its oil and gas industry by itself, or the technology. And the market, like I said, exists because if you have 900 million people without energy, then the potential is there. All you need to do is to empower them.
Yeah, because the argument will be they don't buy in dollars, they don't buy in any currency that would be useful for other exchanges.
Must we depend? The question is this dollar you talked about. How much of what we import with dollar are really necessary for the survival of our people and for the improvement of their health?
Good question.
Most of what we buy in terms of purchases and services are on the elite of the African countries. The elite, how many people have private jets? How many people have vehicles? And so on and so forth. If you are to invest, if you are to invest that energy, that oil, in producing energy and giving to the people in the rural areas, and the people are to take that energy and do their economic activities, the multiply effect will be more than the dollars you are getting today.
So how is your organization trying to do that?
Very good. Like I said, no one African country can raise the kind of money we're looking at. So we've come together to establish the Africa Energy Bank. The Africa Energy Bank is going to be a bank. Hopefully by the middle of next year it will take off. It's a joint partnership between APO and Afro-Exim Bank. And we expect all our member countries to contribute and take shares in it. Other African countries that are not in APO are also invited. And we are going to go outside of Africa. We are today talking with countries in the Middle East. Europe and America if they want to, but we are going to be very careful when countries that do not share our vision of what the oil and gas industry can do and should do for the next so many years. We are not going to open our doors to them because we don't want them to come and make it impossible for us to achieve our mission with the bank.
But wouldn't they push back, this investor, whether Middle Eastern or wherever, wouldn't they push back and say, hang on guys, what have you done with all the billions of dollars that you've already gotten from this resource that you are coming to beg us to give you some of our...
We are not begging them to come in. The Middle East, we are not begging them to come and invest.
No, you want them to invest.
No, look, that's the problem. You see, you say you are begging Europe to come and invest in Nigeria. You can't beg anybody to come and invest in your system. You have to create the enabling environment to make it attractive for them to come and invest. And that's exactly what we're doing. It is in their interest because in the Middle East also, they have more oil than anybody in the world. So it is in their interest for us to sustain the production of oil and gas for the next so many years.
So there is the self-interest bit of it that you will want
That
to
is exactly what we are saying. It is in their interest, in our interest, and in the interest of the industry. Okay? So if they come and invest in this, what we want to do is to make sure that we work towards producing the technology that will make oil and gas a lot more environmentally friendly, because the problem, we are told, is not oil and gas, it is the emissions. So what can we do to produce a technology that will take out that emission? Already prototypes of the technology exist, CDR technologies.
What is that?
Carbon dioxide removal technologies. And by the way, Manir, when we are asked to stop using fossil fuels because science has found out it's dangerous to humanity, at what point in time did the world come to know that burning fossil fuels is dangerous to humanity? Was it in the last 50 years? No. In 1859, an Irish climate scientist, John Tyndall, did a study to show that burning fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases.
But it was ignored.
In 1896, another Swiss scholar, climate, also did. But Europe and America decided to put that study away from public view because they were industrializing at that time. And without oil and gas, they couldn't have industrialized the way they did.
So are you implying that Europe and America are now trying to discourage us from industrialization? That is why you have all this finely put thing about
exactly
climate change.
That's exactly what I'm saying, because now it is the time for Africa to also industrialize. Africa is on the verge of industrialization. You can't industrialize with wind and sun and so on and so forth. No, you need concrete energy, real energy. And this is best provided by oil and gas.
But
and
some
I can
will
tell
say
you
you are a climate change denier by saying this, by saying that they just want to, there's a conspiracy to prevent Africans from industrialization.
Let me make it very clear. Personally, I'm not saying, let's speak as APO Secretary General. We don't believe in this.
You don't believe in what?
In climate change, in climate. The point is, yes, it's having effect, but not as bad as the world is being made to believe. But more importantly, to us, seriously, the issue is not climate challenge. It is energy security for Europe. If Europe is the part of the world that has the reserves in oil and gas that Africa and the Middle East has, believe me, the talk will not be about climate change. It will be how to develop the technology that will make oil and gas a lot more environmentally friendly. In 2007, I was in OPEC. We had the OPEC summit of heads of state. The Saudi, Qatari, and UAE government and other OPEC offered $1 billion to any European or American or any research institution that is going to develop technology for CDR, carbon dioxide removal, CCUS, carbon dioxide storage. But a number of institutions wanted it, and their governments want them not to take that money. Because if they take it and develop that technology, they will make it impossible for Europe and America to wean themselves away from fossil fuels. Because fossil fuel is cheaper. Okay? So they refused. Because now they have demonized oil so much that even we Africans that are dependent on it, within our own people are questioning things.
So what is the way forward, given this seeming conundrum? I mean, the powerful countries of the world are on one side, and then these oil-rich, gas-rich countries are on the other. Don't they have the capabilities to, like, not just fund this research, but do the research themselves?
Who?
The oil lobby. That's the OPEC plus the African petroleum producers. And
unfortunately, the Middle East have gone really a lot further than us when it comes to oil and gas technology. Seriously, I mean, say you can't compare, for example, NNPC with Aramco or ADNOC or Qatar Energy or something like that. But that kind of technology takes much time to develop, and the infrastructure is also a lot more developed in Europe and America. They are doing something, and let me say this, it's not the whole of Europe or the whole of America that is particularly America, that is anti-fossil fuel. There are many groups in America that believe that, look, oil and gas have have much to contribute to global development for the next so many decades. The point is, unfortunately for us in Africa, whether it's our leaders or the thinking of our intellectuals, we have come to see ourselves as being so dependent. Look, when they talk about climate, they say, okay, we will give you $100 billion every year for climate mitigation, climate adaptation, loss or damage. Look, our position is, take that $100 billion, go and invest it in technology that will make oil and gas environmentally friendly, so that we all will be better. But not to talk or to tell us that you'll give $100 billion. For the last 20 years, you've been telling us you'll give. You have never given us 20% of that money. But unfortunately, our leaders sit there expecting to be given that money, and as a result of that, they go and make commitments that we all know cannot be met.
Very good point to go on a short break. Viewers, it is 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is the Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO, Dr. Omar Faruk Ibrahim. Welcome back. It is still 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television, and our guest today is the Secretary General of the African Petroleum Producers Organization, Dr. Omar Faruk Ibrahim. You are mentioning that the Africans, the producers, they seem to be just waiting for something to happen to them instead of taking the initiative. How could they do that? I mean, while all the climate change talk has taken over the conversation, and then even industry is moving away, so to say, from fossil fuel. You have more and more, electric cars and other, devices that use other forms of energy other than fossil fuel. How do you hope to change the conversation?
Manir, I've told you, we are taking practice. We are not just criticizing, we are also taking steps to change things. We are establishing the Africa Energy Bank. Today, APA that started with 8 countries, today we're 18. Since I assumed duty, we've added 3 more countries, and our target in the next year or two to get up to 24 member countries, almost all the oil producing countries in our organization. We have partnered with AfriExim, like I said, to establish the Africa Energy Bank. Nigeria is one of the countries that has expressed interest in hosting the headquarters. Ghana is another, Algeria, Egypt, South Africa, Benin Republic, and Cote d'Ivoire. So hopefully by the end of March, a decision will be taken on which country is going to host this bank. And we are, like I said, working hard on the fundraising. A couple of member countries have already made payments into part of their shares into this organization. That is addressing this. Now, the second question, challenge that we raised was the technology and expertise. We realize that each country cannot just have institutions, technologies. No, it's very expensive. So what we've decided is we are going to have centers of excellence in various regions of the African continent. We have regional centers of excellence in upstream, in downstream, in midstream, and in services, spread across the African continent.
So it seems like you are digging in that the fossil fuel industry is still going strong from what you are saying.
We have no choice. we are not going to leave 125 billion barrels in the ground and 600 trillion cubic feet of gas when our people do not have energy. So if they are not going to buy it, we are happy because it will then give us the opportunity to use it to power our homes and our cities and our villages and our industries.
And what do you do to this seeming drive towards everything either electric or some other forms of energy use?
Manero, let me tell you, in 2015, the world had a vision that by 2030, 2050, the world will have so much renewable energies. We will move away from fossil combustible engines to electric, etc. I agree, the rate at which renewables are growing are fast, but the basis is so small that you can look. All studies, including by the International Energy Agency, admits that for the foreseeable future, we can't do without oil and gas. It is primary. It is the key. It's going to continue to be the biggest source of energy.
Which is sweet music to your ears.
No, it's a reality. I think the fact is this. 7, 8 years ago, they wouldn't want to admit it. 3, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, we were asking Europe and America, for example, Nigeria, come help us with funds to do the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline. They were saying no. As soon as the war with Ukraine started between Ukraine and Russia, these countries were sending emissaries to Nigeria, to heads of state and to ministers. Please, we have the money. We'll help you develop this. But you produce that energy, not for you, but for Europe. So the question is it when you produce fossil fuels for the use of Europe, it is okay. If you produce it for your own use, then it is dangerous to mankind. And after all, Manir, even those that are the greatest advocates of climate change admit and say that Africa has contributed only 3% of global emissions.
But it's now been punished alongside all the other countries that have polluted.
So really, when we go to negotiations like this, our position in APO is this. Today, the mess is because in the last 150 years, from 1870 to 2020, you in Europe and other developed countries have emitted 2,500 gigatons of emissions into the atmosphere. And this atmosphere is a collective heritage of everybody, humans, animals, plants, Africa, Europe, Australia. And a few of you have taken your share and taken other people's share of the good atmosphere. Now, you are asking us that if we continue, then there will be a catastrophe, so we should stop. All we are saying is this, but that is not the solution. The solution is that you have put in 97% of the emissions. You have the technology to remove 50% of the emissions. Why don't you remove it so that it gives us the opportunity to also be able to put some, even if it's 10%. By the time we put 10%, the whole of Africa will be industrialized.
While all this conversation is going on, what most African communities will be interested is, when will all this gas be affordable to people? Because here we are in Nigeria, one of the conversation is cooking gas has gone beyond the reach of many people. Same thing with many others. Do you have a strategy of making these items affordable to people?
Is not cooking gas, it's not petroleum. Everything that you produce and you say you are looking at it in terms of international market, you are operating in it will never be cheap for your people. Simple.
So how will your organization convince the African countries to do something that is in the interest of Africa, so that, I mean, they don't just love to use firewood or charcoal, because the alternative is unaffordable.
One of the things we're trying to do in APO is to try to establish the energy infrastructure that will make it possible for us to move energy from areas of plenty to areas of need. Let me give you a very good example. Take Nigeria. The AKK that you have done.
That is the pipeline that is being constructed from Ajaokuta to Kaduna,
Kano.
Right.
With all I know about it and the fact that, look, these are trunk and then you're going to have subsidiaries. If you establish that kind of infrastructure successfully, it makes energy readily available in various parts of the country.
And affordable.
Yes, because availability makes affordability. Okay? Now, until the infrastructure is there, you can't have cheap energy. And one of the biggest problems you have to look at in almost all African countries is you go to the pipelines or you go wherever. They run from the area of production to the terminals to the sea to be exported. Not from area of production to the hinterland to supply to the people. Okay? So we have to change this orientation, because as we are producing it, we are counting how many dollars we are going to get. We are not producing a million scoff to say how many villages is it going to light. Until we change that, I think we will continue to make it impossible for anybody to access energy.
A very good point to end this very interesting conversation with Dr. Omar Faruk Ibrahim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Manu.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep a date with us.